It's a great pleasure to be here. It's not often I get to speak in front of an audience where I can make references to things like Woodstock and the Beatles, and you actually know what I'm talking about. But usually I get blank stares like, what? That brands you as old immediately. But anyway, I'm very pleased to be here to tell you a little bit about the energy poll. I understand Dean Gilligan told you a little bit about it earlier today, and I'm here to tell you what we've done thus far. It's still an ongoing project, very active, in fact. We're about to collect our second wave of data. And just to give you what we think are some interesting findings from it that you might enjoy viewing, and then we can talk a little bit or have open discussion after that. So this is called the University of Texas Energy Poll, and a little bit of background about it. This is part of a larger strategic initiative on the part of the Macomb School as well as the University of Texas at Austin. Undoubtedly due to our location, one major advantage we have is we're right in the heart of the energy part of Houston being the energy capital of the world, at least for oil-based products. There's a lot of interest in energy in the state of Texas. And particularly as that relates to the Macomb School, I've been here now 30 years at the Macomb School, and I can honestly state that throughout that time we've had outstanding programs at all levels, at the BBA, the MBA, and the PhD level. But if we suffer from one thing, that is that we don't have a solid image for something. It's actually a marketing issue, and in fact, we had McKinsey do a detailed analysis of our school to try to identify what are some of our strengths and weaknesses, what can we play on, and what can we address in terms of our weaknesses. And one of the key conclusions of that study was that we're not known for anything. We're known as having a great school with great programs, but when you think of Macomb's, what do you think of? And part of our problem is if you go 1,000 miles in every direction, there's no other top 20 major business school. When you tend to think of the top schools, you think of Northeast, you think of the West Coast, or you think of the Midwest. And so we have a disadvantage here in Texas of trying to become more well-known and top of mind in terms of being one of the outstanding business schools in the world. So Dean Gilligan, when he started on as dean, did a detailed analysis situation and came up with a strategic plan. And a key element of that strategic plan was to focus on energy. We identified two of our key strengths that we have as a school that other schools do not, or at least aren't as strong in. One is energy, that we are in, like I say, a very energy important area. Secondly, Latin America. And although both of these are better, our strengths are much more on line of energy than it is in Latin America. Although we do have a lot of programs, we have an MBA program in Mexico City, but we do already have a strategic strength in energy issues. We already had an energy finance center, and a number of faculty already doing research in energy. So that became a key strategic focus of our business school. And we even formed an energy management and innovation center within the Macomb School that has funding to engage in various initiatives related to energy. Well, I'm the marketing guy, and so as chair of the department, I was thinking, well, what can we contribute to this important initiative of the school? And one of the things that we do in marketing is we understand consumers. We try to know what they think, what they do, what's important to them. And so I started thinking, and I was actually talking to one of our important alumni, Peter Zandon, who's done a lot of things for our school. He's started several companies. Now he is at Hill & Knowlton. And he came to me and he said, you know what we need to do? We need to do an energy poll. We need to monitor consumer sentiment related to energy issues. And we could do this and try to become a knowledge base for information on consumers related to energy. And so that's what started the idea, and we started working on it. And this idea has grown and grown and grown, and now we've collected one wave of data already, and we announced this poll last October in Washington, D.C. President Powers, Dean Gilligan, and myself went and had a press conference. We wanted this to be a national poll, so that's why we didn't do it here in Texas. We did it in Washington, D.C., and it got some interest. We'd like to see it grow to have more interest, but it got a fairly healthy response, and a lot of people have been interested in it. It's been a very detailed process. We developed a questionnaire in 2010, so we went through and tried to develop what we thought were very relevant and meaningful questions. And an important thing about this poll is our goal is to be an objective source on energy information related to consumers. And so as part of that process, there's always a tendency to say, oh, in Texas, it must be the oil companies, right? They're the ones driving this poll. We've gone through great lengths to get many different groups involved in this process of developing this questionnaire. So nonprofit groups like the Sierra Club have seen the questionnaire and put in questions. Oil companies have had their input. Companies like Walmart have had input on this as well. Many different academicians have had input on it. We have an advisory board with people from schools like Cambridge, Stanford, University of Mannheim in Germany, because eventually we'd like to take this to an international level as well. So we like to say that there have been many eyeballs that have seen this question and contributed questions to this survey. Now, given that it's a survey and we can only ask, typically people lose their patience after about 17 minutes on the telephone or on the internet. So asking 17 minutes of questions is not a lot. So we can't ask anything. In fact, our file of questions we haven't asked is considerably longer than the questions we did ask. But what we tried to do is narrow it down to the most meaningful and relevant questions at that particular time that we thought our different constituencies would be interested in. And I'm going to present some of the top-line results today of the first wave. But I should also mention the questionnaire kind of has two parts. One part is a basic core index. And what we're trying to do is measure consumer sentiment, how they feel right now about energy issues. And one of the key goals of the questionnaire is to monitor this over time. So we're going to do this questionnaire twice a year, continuously for the near future. And now we're about ready to launch the second wave of the questionnaire. And a lot of the questions have changed. What we do is we change the issues depending upon what's important at that particular moment. So as one example, on this wave, we're asking a lot of questions about hydraulic fracking. I'm sure you've all seen that a lot in the news. People are real interested in that right now. And so we are asking a whole series of questions on hydraulic fracking that were not on the first questionnaire, but they're on this questionnaire. And so what we want to do is respond to what's going on in the environment and provide relevant and interesting information to different constituencies on energy issues. So as I said, we developed this questionnaire in 2010. And as I mentioned, we've collaborated with many different representatives from different academic institutions, polling companies, non-government organizations, energy producers, as well as energy consumers. And so this represents the views of a lot of different people. And as I mentioned, the inaugural launch was in October 2011. This is an online survey. The first wave was with 3,400 respondents, a nationally representative sample. We had a higher than normal sample. Subsequent waves are going to be about 2,000, but we wanted to validate the methodology. We wanted to validate the questionnaire. And so we got more than we normally would get just to be able to do that. It's weighted to reflect the U.S. Census demographics. So, for example, if there were slightly more males or females in a particular area, we have a formula to adjust that so that the data that we present are representative of the U.S. population. And it's gotten a fair degree of media coverage. These are just a few examples of some of the media coverage we've gotten. The Houston Chronicle, Fuel Fix, Oil and Gas Journal, Politico, USA Today blog, Greenhouse, and I've also done a TV interview that was on the internet as well, and various different articles as well. And we have now also hired on another individual who has media expertise that's going to help us to get the word out even more. So we hope to increase our media presence as time goes on. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about, these are some of the key findings. Now, it's not everything we found. I could go on for a long time with all the different, but I just wanted to hit what we thought were some of the interesting things that you might find of interest and be wanting to know about. So the first questions were more kind of general consumer sentiment. And unfortunately, the answer to this question is not very positive. The largest percentage of people think we're heading in the wrong direction in terms of energy issues. Only 13.7% of consumers think we're heading in the right direction. So in other words, there's a general pessimism around the country about where we're going with regards to energy issues. And one other interesting fact about this, the pessimism tends to increase with age. So the youngest consumers are the most optimistic, and I guess maybe that's the optimism of youth, I don't know. We get more cynical as we age, and so there's more pessimism among the older population than in the young population. Furthermore, the long-term picture is even bleaker. In 25 years from now, 41% of our consumers think we'll be worse off. So we're heading in the wrong direction, and think we'll be worse off in 25 years, and only 22.5% think we'll be better off in 25 years. So not the most optimistic. This is the core of our consumer sentiment index. These are questions that we're going to continuously monitor over time. Now, admittedly, our economy is not in its best shape right now, and there is a general wave of consumer pessimism, and a lot of that could be reflected in these particular numbers. But certainly, with regards to energy issues, consumers are not that optimistic at this point in time. Furthermore, we talk about energy prices. This is how consumers perceive what they think of energy prices, and it's probably no big surprise to you that they think they're very high. A lot of it is driven by gasoline. As you can see, 95% of consumers think gas is high or somewhat high. Not a big surprise, particularly although this data was collected last October. Particularly if into the current poll, this may even go up, although it's already at 95%. But with the enormous gas price rise that's going on right now, that will even be more inflated. And it tends to spill over to the other types of energy as well. So although not quite as high, heating oil and electricity and natural gas are also perceived as high. And it's really, but I think it's more driven by the gasoline here. These aren't quite as high as the gas, but there's a general perception because we see gasoline. Every time we drive home or go to the gas station, we see the rise in gas prices. So we tend to think that energy in general is high. So consumers are pessimistic, and a lot of it seems to be due to the fact that they see the energy prices as being very high. And they expect them to increase. And this was, again, last October, so I guess they were correct. They did increase, or they are increasing as we speak right now. But a lot of people, particularly for gas, think that gas and heating oil are going to increase. But well over 2/3 of the sample thinks that energy prices are going to increase from last October to now. So it's interesting to see that particular projection. As a result, we asked people, in 12 months, what proportion of your household budget do you think you'll be spending on energy? And you can see here a whopping 69.1% think that they're going to be spending significantly more of their household budget on energy. And again, this could be contributing to the pessimism. It's going up. I'm going to have to spend more money. I'm going to have less things to spend on other things. And that, again, is contributing partly to the pessimism here. And only 5.1% expect a decrease. Which is interesting in terms of things we'll talk about later in terms of what people are doing to deal with these issues. One might expect that this is one area you can control by decreasing consumption, but nevertheless, people do perceive that they will be spending more of their household budget on energy issues. This is probably one of the most interesting charts. We asked people how satisfied they thought different constituencies were doing or what kind of job they were doing. What's interesting is, this looks a little bit at survey bias. Number one was you and your household. The consumers thought they were doing quite good at it. They were quite happy with themselves. 57% thought that they were, I had a pointer, but 57% thought they were doing a great job, and only 13% thought they were doing a bad job. So consumers think they're doing okay, that they're addressing these issues by conserving energy or doing whatever. But what's right behind it is interesting, is engineers and scientists, research institutes, and I also lump in with that colleges and universities, were fairly high on the chart in terms of satisfaction. Although, please note, we're talking about 1/3 of the people saying that they were satisfied, that there's a significant number dissatisfied as well. But relatively speaking, these are the groups that are seen as doing the best job of addressing energy issues. So as an academic myself, that's encouraging to me. At least they think we're doing something about it. But then there are also the alternative energy companies, wind and solar. These are the organizations that are seen as doing the best job of addressing energy issues today. On the other hand, at the very bottom, and this reflects findings in the Harris poll about satisfaction with the U.S. Congress. I don't know if you can see it way down here. Maybe it's appropriate that it's that low down there. You all there probably can't see it, but it's U.S. Congress, okay? Only 8% of our sample thought that we're satisfied with the job Congress is doing in addressing energy issues. So there's a widespread dissatisfaction with the U.S. Congress in terms of how they're addressing energy issues. And the dissatisfaction is very high, 71% of dissatisfaction. It's just off the chart relative to every other group that we studied here. So it's, there's a big statement there. People are very unhappy with the job that Congress is doing. Although the irony of this is, this is not only restricted to energy. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in our country with Congress, but the problem is it's with Congress as a group. If you look at individual representatives or senators, people are happy with their own representative, so they're going to elect them back into office. They want everybody else to get rid of their senators or representatives and keep their own, and so there's not anything going to change there because they're going to elect the same guys back into office. So, but they are collectively unhappy with Congress. President Barack Obama is right in the middle. He's got a mid-range score in terms of people being satisfied, but he's also got one of the highest scores of being dissatisfied as well. So it's a very mixed reaction in terms of satisfaction or dissatisfaction in relation to the president. And then you have in between, other things way down there, government in general. There's a general dissatisfaction with government, and also big companies. So big companies and the government are seen as not doing enough to address these issues. Now, part of this is consumer perceptions. I'm not saying that companies aren't doing a lot. There's a lot of companies I deal with that are doing marvelous things in terms of addressing energy issues. And what it suggests is that maybe companies can do a better job. Sometimes companies don't want to broadcast all the things they're doing because they don't want to be too self-serving. But this would suggest that maybe they need to, because they are doing a lot of things, but the consumers aren't seeing it. It's not showing up for them what's happening in this particular area. But even the Sierra Club and some of the the nonprofit organizations are down there in terms of satisfaction as well. So generally, research and scientists the highest, and then small companies and alternative companies, and then at the bottom is the government and major companies as well. So that's how we view the companies. Now, relating back to the government, another aspect of this is, why are they dissatisfied with the government? And what this slide tells us is mainly because they need to do more. So the largest percentage, 56.7%, think the government needs to be doing more to address energy issues, and only 25.2% think that they're doing too much. I don't even know why they think they're doing too much, but that's what our consumers tell us. But generally, the government needs to do more, and that's why consumers are giving such low ratings. They would like to see more devoted to energy issues. We also ask stuff like, if you could tell the government where to spend the money, where should it be prioritized? And what came out of this was, first of all, you can see the largest percentage going to job creation. And that shouldn't be too surprising. Into this election that's going on now, the number one issue in voters' minds is jobs, getting more jobs for people. A lot of people are out of work, so that's not surprising. However, which was a little distressing to us is, if you look down here, environmental protection, energy innovation, and energy security were pretty low on people's priorities, okay? So when you look at it relative to these other issues, that's not a very encouraging finding. It might suggest that people aren't that concerned about energy issues. However, I think it's just a function of some of these other things overwhelming the energy issue, because we kind of asked the question in a different way to try to pull out a little bit more of understanding of what's going on here. And this slide, I think, casts a little more light on this issue. We asked people to prioritize. And on one end of the scale was we should focus on not harming the environment, all the way to the other end, which is focusing on economic growth. And we asked them to choose. Where on this scale would you be? So if you were on this, you said definitely we should focus on the environment at the expense of economic growth. The other end was we should focus mainly on economic growth. And in the middle is about equal or neutral on the issue. And what you can see here is that there is a fairly large percentage, 33.3%, that the environment is more important. That's a priority. So when you put it in that context, people are very concerned about the environment and energy issues related to the environment. But there is also a sizable segment related to economic growth, that the focus needs to be focusing on improving our economy and the economic health of our nations. So it's split. There are camps interested in both of these issues. And given it's an election year, of course, that begs the question of, and when we were in Washington, we got this question a lot, how does that break down politically? We did not announce that in Washington because what we did not want this poll to become is a political poll, so we didn't even address it in Washington. But now, since we're here in Austin, I will give you that answer. And what we found is probably not going to surprise you at all. But the Republicans are much more concerned about economic growth. Okay, so 52%. So you can see it's much more weighted heavily this side for the Republicans, whereas with the Democrats, it's more on the environmental side. And that's pretty much along the lines of what the candidates talk about, so it's not real surprising, but it does make sense in terms of what we see the political orientation of the different parties. So there is a strong political difference in terms of what should be the key focus in the environment versus economic growth. Another area we were interested in is new technologies. And given that there's a concern with the household budget and that consumers will be spending a lot on energy, are there certain things that consumers do that are more likely to adopt which would help them save energy and also cut down on their household budget spent on energy? And we tested a wide variety of different things, but these were the ones that came to the top. These are the 3 new technologies that consumers indicated that they were most likely to adopt. And this isn't probably too surprising. The smart meter technology, most local utilities push this. It's very easy to install. They just come to your house and install it, and you can immediately save a lot of money. And so that was 38% of the population. Owning a hybrid vehicle, these are becoming more popular, so it's probably not real surprising. A lot of people said they would adopt this technology. The Prius is very popular, so lots of people want to drive these hybrids, and they're being marketed more actively by car companies. Probably the only slight surprise was 21% saying installing solar panels, because behavior has shown, one of the things we've learned about consumer energy consumption is people will say they do something, but whether they'll actually do it is another whole issue, and it directly correlates with the amount of effort or money or cost that is associated with adopting that technology. So, for example, this I would expect. It's very easy to install. You just have a utility come over and install it. This on the end takes a lot more cost and effort to do it. And so although 21% say they would install it, it reflects at least a positive attitude towards that technology. The actual likelihood of adopting that is going to be a lot lower because it's just very expensive and takes a lot more effort. But at least there is an openness to these new technologies. And I should say there were some strong demographic differences for these technologies. It was skewed in terms of age and education. Younger and higher educated consumers were the most likely to adopt these technologies. So an age and education factor here. Okay, we also asked them about what are their top concerns. And what was interesting about this is it tended to skew towards national issues. So things like our nation's consumption of oil from foreign sources, or our nation's progress in developing better ways to use energy efficiently, or our nation's progress in developing renewable sources of energy. Those were the highest in terms of rating, and then lumped in right below that was the portion of your household budget. So they tend to be concerned about the more global efforts, and then their personal consumption was lower, but still important. I'm not belittling these issues. Still a large percentage said they were concerned about these issues, but they seemed a little bit more concerned about national issues, perhaps because, and this is just a conjecture on my part, they feel they have more control down here. They can address these, whereas up here, they need to be concerned because others need to address these issues. So it's more of wanting somebody to do something about these things. I can take care of my own house here, but I need somebody to take care of it. That's just a conjecture, but that possibly might be what's going on in this particular case. We asked people, how informed do you think you are? And this was a very surprising result to me, because normally, I've done a lot of consumer surveys over the years, and we as consumers always overestimate how much influence or how much knowledge we have in certain situations. A good example of this is, I've done research on husband-wife decision-making, and if you ask husbands, who makes the decisions in your house? And the husband always goes, well, of course I do. I make the decisions. And if you ask the wives, who makes the decision? Of course, the wife says, of course, I make the decisions. He doesn't have anything to do with it. And furthermore, there's even studies that have been done that have been found that even couples, they've asked couples who have been married like over 30 years to predict what their spouse would like in terms of choices, making consumer choices. And the correct rate is about 20%. So even living with someone for 30 years doesn't help you predict what that person likes. So we know less than we think we do, is my point here. And so, but normally consumers don't like to admit it. Nobody likes to say, I don't know anything about this. People will overestimate how much they know. So it was quite extraordinary to me to find that 33.7% of our consumers thought that they were not very knowledgeable. It's probably even higher than that. But it suggests that we have some work to do to try to educate consumers about energy issues because they're not very knowledgeable. And again, this usually is underestimated. Many more people don't know it. And only 24.2% said they were knowledgeable. So it does suggest that, that there is room to educate consumers about energy issues, and that would also perhaps increase the importance of these issues as well. We asked them, okay, would you be interested in learning more about energy? And we were quite surprised to find, wow, there's a high degree of interest. They admitted they don't know very much, but they want to know more. And so they particularly want to know about reducing their own energy usage, because that is something they can control the most. Local and then national and then global energy issues. So the farther it gets away from myself, or the closer it is to myself, the more interested in, and the interest reduces as we get farther away. But still, even a high degree of learning more about energy issues. One little bit side note to this was a little bit disappointing is this was highest among people who already thought they knew a lot. So you'd hope that the people that were not very knowledgeable would want to learn more, but it was actually the people that thought they were knowledgeable, but they wanted to learn more. They were the highest on this scale. So that was an interesting side note to this as well. But people do want to learn more about energy issues. And then, since this is an election year, we wanted to get a little bit of feel for how energy issues relate to voting behavior, and how people vote and how that relates to energy issues, and how important energy issues are in their voting behavior. And so what we found is that, first of all, just an overall slide, is that 35% of people vote in all elections. No matter what election, local election, they vote in everything. So those are the heavy voters. And 26% vote in most elections. So about half the population are fairly active voters. But there are 15% that don't vote in any elections at all. And so 15% do not exercise their right to vote. So that was probably not surprising, but just interesting to see that there was that large a percentage that don't vote in any elections. Now, how does that relate to political affiliation? We found that the highest no voters were independents. And in the parties, about only 8% of both Republicans and Democrats voted no elections. So political affiliation tends to indicate interest in issues and voting behavior, and it's the independents that tend to vote. And it's also highly correlated with education. The 43% of the people with a college degree or higher vote in all elections, compared to 28% with only a high school degree or less. So education tends to increase voting behavior. And as you age, people at 65 plus are 3 times more likely to vote in all elections than young people. So the 65 plus crowd are the very most active voters and that has implications when we talk about voting behavior. So what we did is an interesting thing. I just want to mention a social media program that's going on right now. This is for the Vote for Energy. The American Petroleum Institute launched their Vote for Energy campaign to encourage energy issues as a voting priority. So it's an active campaign that they have started to try to get energy at the forefront of people's minds in this coming election. And the way they've decided to do this is through the social media. Okay? And so the question is then, if that's their goal, is to increase the concern about energy issues relative to all the voting statistics that we just talked about, the question is, will this be successful? Which audience are they going to reach with this Vote for Energy platform? And here's what we find. Probably not a big shock to you, but in terms of the use, where do people get their information on energy? We get about 53% in the 18 to 24 age group that get their energy issue information from social media. And then that rapidly declines to about the age of 55 when it's only 17%. Okay? So I think you can see the implication here The heaviest voting segment is the 65 plus group, and the lowest voting segment is down here, and they're trying to get their information to this group, or they're getting their information to this group, and not as much to this group, which is the heavy voting public. So that suggests maybe that the social media alone is not going to be adequate to get out their message in terms of voting for energy issues. It's going to hit the different segment that's not going to vote as heavily on these issues. And it's also going to depend on party. We found that Democrats are more likely to use the social media, 35%, than independents and Republicans. And so it's going to be more skewed towards the Democrats in terms of social media as well. And then further, we talked about how it influences voting behavior. And we asked people specifically, would you vote for a candidate that supports these particular issues? Okay? And so the first one is tax exemptions for renewable energy. And you can see here that this is more of a Democratic issue. So 66% of Democrats said they would vote for a candidate that supports that issue, down to 48% of Republicans. Tax incentives for hybrid vehicles, again, 62% for Democrats, 38%. But more offshore drilling in U.S. waters, more Republicans are likely to vote for a candidate on that issue, and Democrats the least. And then increasing spending on public transit is lower than all the other issues, but 48% Democrat, 41% Independent, and 29% Republican. So there's a big difference across the issues and what the candidates stand for in terms of their voting behavior. Okay, those are some overall statistics. What is the future? Our second release, right now, as we speak, we have finalized our questionnaire today, as a matter of fact. And we are just about to start our second round of data collection. As I said, we've sent our questionnaire out to all our different constituencies, companies, nonprofit organizations, other universities, faculty, and we've come up with a new questionnaire. It's got the core index questions, sentiment index questions, and then it's also got other questions like on hydraulic fracking and other kinds of issues as well. What is current now and what's interesting. And we're going to release this data on April 10th. And it's actually going to be a double release. We're going to do it, I believe it's April 9th in Houston and April 10th here in Austin. It may even be in this room for all I know. But we are going to release this coming up with the second wave. And we'll also be able to look at some time trends from the first wave to the second wave. And there's a little more of a political slant in it as well, given that there's an election coming up. And particularly, we'll do another wave of it in October, and that will be heavily oriented towards political issues. But we need to ask some of the political questions now so we can monitor how there are changes related to that. And then we're going to calculate our energy index. We can monitor this over time. What we want to do, it's kind of similar to the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index. And this index it sort of captures how consumers feel. It's like their optimism. It's very important in business because when the consumer optimism index is high, people spend money, okay? When it's low, people are not spending money. And we're trying to sort of replicate that in the energy area, saying how people feel about energy issues. And so we're going to start tracking that and monitoring that over time. One of the, I should mention, this data is going to be available if there are companies, if you're in a company that would be interested in getting the data to analyze this data for your own purposes. Our college, our development office is developing a subscription model where you will be able to get information on or get the actual poll data to answer questions that you might have. Because as I said before, we want to be an objective source of information on energy. And so if you have any more information, or would like any more information, this is my email address, wayne.hoyer@mccombs.utexas.edu. And we also have a website that we update frequently. We have stories. We release the latest data. We're always getting questions from the media. Hey, do you have data on this issue? And a lot of times we do, and we answer that, and we post it on our website. So we're constantly updating our website with new information about energy and what consumers think. Okay, so I think we're out of time. So thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.